Ash, we're going to go into our first topic, and I want you to introduce your topic this week. So we've got three topics this week. Ash, give me yours.
Yeah, so my topic is horror directors. So I thought
Ooh.
that I might just sort of open it up to the ones that I feel like are more my taste, that I find to be my favorites, that obviously I tend to like their films. And then I figured if you guys can kind of join to the list and let me know what I missed or what you would add.
Love
So I
that.
think we all have similar tastes, but also we like a lot of different style of horror films, obviously. So I'm going to open it up with a pretty obvious one, obviously with John Carpenter, being that Halloween, I feel like was one of the first slashers that I remember seeing, obviously when I was younger. I think that's just a pretty classic answer. I can't really imagine anyone saying that he's not in the top for horror directors.
Oh, easily. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
no one can argue with that. I don't know that he's like my personal number one. I just haven't seen enough of his films, but I want to see more. So I've added a couple of them to my watch list. But yeah, he makes great films. He does great partnerships, obviously, for the music aspect of it, and is very involved with like, the different scores for his films. So that always adds to it, which I appreciate because that creates a lot of times, how you feel leading up to those kill moments is kind of what the music is doing. So I definitely like the way he sets up his environments and his horror films. And then a big one for me is Wes Craven. No big shocker there.
That's my number
Obviously,
one.
with Nightmare. Yeah, same for me. It's my number one with Nightmare and Scream. I think that he just has a style that I just vibe with. And I think the colors that he chooses to use as well, and the way he's involved in the castings of his films, as far as the actors, I think really makes a big difference. So big fan of Wes Craven.
Amen. Good pick.
Yeah, yeah, he's definitely. I think I was trying to decide what my number one was between him and Sam Raimi. I do love Sam Raimi, obviously, for the Evil Dead movies, but I think that I've had a longer connection to Wes Craven. I've liked his movies for longer. So that's probably my number one, but I did want to mention Sam Raimi because obviously he's just the king of camp. I
He
mean,
is.
Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness. We talked about this briefly, Harry, but like Drag Me to
Drag
Hell, I
Me to
want to
Hell.
rewatch that.
Yep.
Great, great movie. If you haven't seen that one, Byron, definitely check that one out. Little quick shout outs to a couple that I feel like only have a few horror films, but they're still worthy of noting. Scott Derrickson, shout out to him again for Sinister and the Black Phone. Mike Flanagan,
Yes,
a lot of
damn it. I
horror
thought I was going to
TV
sneak
shows.
that past you.
No,
Yes.
Hush. I love
Yeah,
Hush.
Hush is great.
And then James Wan, I feel like you have to mention as well when you're
You got
talking
it.
about horror directors. And then last shout out, well, Jordan Peele as well. That's more modern horror. I didn't know if you guys wanted to go too much into modern horror, but I love all three of his films. I think that's no question that he obviously knows what he's doing. But quick shout out to Edgar Wright, actually. I know he's only done Last Night in Soho and Shaun of the Dead, but I think those are both brilliant. And I hope that he does more horror films. I know Last Night in Soho is not quite as on the nose horror as other films, but I still think it has those horror thriller
Oh, it's
psychological
horror
elements.
noir for
Yeah,
sure. Yeah.
yeah. So I think he's got it in him. I really do hope that he does more in that realm. But yeah, those are the ones that I thought of, and I definitely would say Wes Craven being the one that I would lean to the most. But I think that John Carpenter might be the most long term, the best. That's the most notable for a lot of people.
Hell yeah.
So Byron, I don't know. What do you think? What do you add to the list? I assume you probably have a specific one to add to this or a few.
I do have a few. I will say one that I left off because he's not a horror director because I believe, he's only done the one horror movie, but Sir Ridley Scott,
Yeah.
creating one of the greatest horror movies of all time, in my opinion, the best horror movie of all time.
Would you say Alien Covenant is a horror?
Yes,
Well, there's two.
There you go.
good
Nailed it.
point.
Gotcha, Ghostface. Gotcha.
I forgot he came back to the franchise like halfway through.
He does have like
Like,
one horror franchise. Yeah.
yeah, he's just like, you guys aren't doing a good enough job. Hold on.
Yeah.
Hold my beer. I'll quickly make Covenant.
Yeah. Let Daddy cook.
Um, yeah, Wes Craven was definitely another one. I think he just brings a fun twist to horror. All of his movies, even A Nightmare on Elm Street, like, well, even with it being as frightening as it is, or Freddy Krueger, like his lines in that movie,
The
It's just
idea of Freddy,
amazing.
the idea of Freddy is
Yeah,
fantastic.
There's
yeah,
so much comedy in his films every time, even when it's like a serious thing like murdering people. There's always a comedy aspect.
yeah. And then the other two names I had, first was Dario Argento,
Yep.
which I believe I am 8 or 9 movies into his filmography. I believe he's only done horror. I don't think he has anything else in any other genre. So he's literally the definition of a horror director. Um, all of his movies are fantastic. You guys know how many I've recommended to you. And the other was George A. Romero,
Yep. I heard of him.
who obviously has done all of the. Oh, he's the zombie guy.
Mhm.
Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, The Return of the Living Dead, Day of the Dead, Land of the Dead. His world building with those movies is fantastic.
Nice. Oh, I got a couple just to add to the list. I had everyone has already said. I've also got Tobe Hooper needs to be talked about. Just for Texas Chainsaw alone. Like he's done others, of course, but like Texas Chainsaw alone is a brilliant piece of cinema and super damn important for horror. Every time Byron looks around, it really is like Ghostface. Of like when
He is embodying Ghostface.
yeah,
Yes.
it's so distracting. Toe Hooper for sure. You mentioned Jordan Peele. I also need to mention, just for some new age horror, definitely need to mention Ari Aster. Um, I think like in terms of new age horror, I think he's needs to be mentioned. He's unbelievable, especially his first two. I know Beau is Afraid is very divisive, but I think everyone can agree that Hereditary is brilliant, and some people even think Midsummer's better. I love Midsummer. I think Hereditary is better, but I think Midsummer's fantastic. Robert Eggers doing The Witch and Lighthouse. I know me and you, Asher, are very in agreement on The Witch. It's just not. We just don't particularly love it as much as others, but the Lighthouse is sensational.
Oh yeah.
The Lighthouse is so damn good. So that he definitely needs to be talked about. One that you already mentioned, Mike Flanagan, but I also want to mention Jennifer Kent. She did the Babadook, as well as the Nightingale, which is Australian horror films. Nightingale is more of like a disturbing thriller, but it has horror elements. But the Babadook, I think, is sublime. So in terms of up and coming directors, I think she's awesome.
Yeah, those are great additions to the list. I was also just thinking, quick shout to Ty West, obviously X
Oh
and
yeah,
Pearl and Maxine Coming. I know that I am a huge fan of those movies, and obviously I think Mia Goth is a big part of why. But I also think that his style of horror is good. And I also am not as much anymore, but I did at one point have a pretty good fascination with Rob Zombie films. So I'll give a quick shout out to him. He's definitely very gory, definitely has a very specific type of horror films that he makes, but there was a point in time when it did, capture me and get me more into horror films. So those were always a fun time.
did you like the Rob Zombie Halloween?
You know what? I actually haven't seen his Halloween films. I've
Good.
seen like, House of a Thousand Corpses and all of those, but I have not. I actually want to watch them because I'm curious.
You sure you want to watch them? Okay.
I might regret it, but I am very curious to see what the thoughts will be.
One that we didn't mention, but like it's just not my cup of tea. But the Cronenberg films,
Yeah.
very much body horror sort of stuff.
Hmm.
Definitely not my cup of tea, but um, they are others. Byron, you've watched a lot of Cronenberg, haven't you?
I've watched my fair share. Not too many great ones. I don't know how many movies Brandon Cronenberg has. Because he can't have a lot, but I
Not
think I've seen
many.
like 6 in total.
Right.
But I name them probably not.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could give a shout out to The Fly. I do like that
Yeah.
David Cronenberg horror film. Jeff Goldblum is great. It's really gross, but yeah, body horror doesn't tend to be my genre of horror, unfortunately. I think it's really any of ours for the most part.
For sure.
I mean,
One
I fuck with all horror, so.
one that no one's mentioned yet, which is kind of surprising, The Master of Suspense, which is Alfred Hitchcock, which definitely needs to be talked about because Psycho is one of the greatest horror movies of all time, as well as Stanley Kubrick. Even though like Ridley Scott isn't predominantly horror at all, The Shining is arguably one of the best horror films of all time. So it goes to show that horror direction can't be just focused on in terms of just one director doing just like a Dario Argento for sure, but a lot of directors, both new and old, definitely dive into horror and produce excellence, like Edgar Wright. So yeah, there's definitely like ones all over the place, I think.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I didn't mention Hitchcock mainly because I have only seen Psycho and it's been a while since I've rewatched it. So I didn't feel like I'm the right person to talk about him because I just haven't seen a lot of his films. But I'm sure at some point I will check some of those older ones off. I just tend to fall more into that 80s and forward horror. I don't know. That's kind of always where I've vibed.
Yeah, with horror, I was messaging you about this, Ash. Go the other way. Go back to like the 30s and the 20s, because there's some really, really good stuff in amongst those decades.
It's so hard
Yeah.
to take Byron seriously. Like it's so.
Ghostface is
Yeah, but
telling
do you-
me to
but
watch
yeah, but
more horror films.
Yeah, but would you not say it's hard to take me seriously regardless?
Well, don't let me get into that. Byron,
Yeah.